The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, amber glow over the broken landscape of Earth. The war with the alien invaders had been raging for years. Cities once filled with life now lay abandoned, their crumbling structures a reminder of the humanity that had once thrived there. The sound of distant explosions could be heard, the faint echo of battle from the farthest edges of the city. In this wasteland, Sergeant Jake Holloway sat alone in a small, weather-beaten shelter, watching as the last rays of the sun faded away. His eyes, hardened by years of war, reflected the weight of the world. Jake wasn't sure how long it had been since he last saw another human being. The war had stripped him of his comrades, and the alien invaders, with their advanced technology, had nearly wiped out every major human settlement. The war felt endless. It seemed like there was no hope left. His outpost was a small, forgotten place on the outskirts of what used to be a bustling city. Now, it was just another stop for the soldiers and survivors who had nowhere else to go. Jake had been stationed here for months, the days blending together in a never-ending cycle of survival. There was a constant fear hanging in the air. The alien forces had an almost unstoppable grip on Earth, and humanity's last stand seemed to be slipping away. Jake had fought in countless battles, witnessed the destruction of cities, and watched as the planet's resources dwindled. But in his heart, a flicker of hope remained, though he knew it was fading with every passing day. As he sat in the dim light of his shelter, his mind wandered. What was left to fight for? His friends, his family, all gone. The world seemed to be moving towards an inevitable end, and he had no idea how much longer he could hold on. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the sound of running footsteps. Jake stiffened, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon strapped to his side. He moved quickly, his trained soldier's instincts taking over. The footsteps grew louder, faster, as though someone was fleeing from something. It was strange. No one ever ventured this far into the wasteland. Not unless they had a good reason. Without warning, the figure appeared in the doorway of his shelter, and Jake's breath caught in his throat.
A woman!
She was covered in dirt and grime, her clothes torn and singed. Her hair, once a deep brown, was now matted and caked with sweat. She looked exhausted, and yet there was an unmistakable urgency in her eyes. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Without hesitation, she ran straight into Jake's arms, her body trembling with fear. She buried her face against his chest, as though seeking comfort from the chaos that had consumed her life. Jake was frozen for a moment, confused and unsure of what to do. He had seen many things during this war, but never like this. A woman, in the middle of this wasteland, running to him as though he was the only person left on Earth who could help her. "Who are you?" Jake asked, his voice low but firm. The woman didn't answer immediately. She was breathing heavily, trying to calm herself. Her eyes flicked nervously towards the door, as though expecting someone, or something to follow her. It was then that Jake noticed the fear in her eyes, a fear that went beyond exhaustion. I need help," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her words were shaky, as if speaking took all the strength she had left. Jake gently pushed her away, taking a step back to look at her more closely. "Help with what?" he asked, still unsure of the situation. Her gaze met his for the first time, and Jake could see the raw desperation in her eyes. "They're coming," she said, her voice cracking. "They're after me!" Jake's instincts kicked in. He had been in enough situations to know when danger was near. The alien invaders were relentless, and if this woman was running from them, then she was in more trouble than he could imagine. He glanced around the shelter, his mind racing. He needed to act fast. He had no idea who this woman was or why she was here, but if she was running from the aliens, then it was only a matter of time before they found her. "Who's coming after you?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. The woman took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She wiped her dirty hands across her face, her eyes darting to the door once again. "I'm Lyra," she said, her voice still trembling. I'm from one of the last human colonies. She paused, as if struggling to find the right words. The aliens. They've been hunting us down, one by one. They wiped out our colony, and I was the last one to escape. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors of human colonies that had been overrun, but he had never encountered anyone from them before. The fact that she was still alive meant something. It meant that she had escaped a fate worse than death. "Why come here?" Jake asked, his voice still filled with confusion. "Why run to me?" Lyra hesitated before answering. "Because you're the only one who can help." Jake's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Lyra looked him in the eyes, her expression growing more serious. "You're not just any soldier, Jake Holloway. You're the last hope for humanity." "I didn't come here just to find safety. I came to find you." Jake felt his heart race. There was no way she could know who he was. He was just a soldier, one among thousands who had been fighting the aliens for years. What could she possibly mean?
I don't understand, Jake muttered, stepping back, his thoughts racing.
Lyra's voice was barely a whisper as she spoke again. "Your blood."
"It's different. You're not just human."
"You carry the..." Jake's mind reeled at her words. He had heard stories about humanity's last hope, about a secret weapon hidden somewhere within the human race, but he had always dismissed them as just that. Stories. To think that it was actually him was beyond belief. "You're not making sense," Jake said, his voice shaking with disbelief. But Lyra's eyes were clear, filled with certainty. "I'm not wrong."
You have the power, and that's why they're coming after me.
"They know what you are, and they'll stop at nothing to get rid of you." Suddenly, the sound of distant engines reached Jake's ears, the unmistakable hum of alien drones searching for survivors. Lyra's face went pale, and her hand grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him towards the back of the shelter. "They're here," she whispered urgently.
"We don't have much time."
Jake's heart raced as the realization hit him. This was no ordinary woman. She wasn't just a survivor. She was part of something much bigger, something he didn't understand. But one thing was certain. Whatever was coming, he was the key to stopping it. Without another word, Jake grabbed his weapon, and together they made their way into the shadows, the sound of alien drones growing louder with each passing second. Jake's heart raced as he followed Lyra through the dark corridors of the shelter. The hum of the alien drones grew louder with every step they took, and he could feel the tension in the air. Lyra had been running from something, and now he was a part of it, whether he liked it or not. But what truly disturbed him was her claim that he was the key to humanity's survival. He didn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. He was just a soldier, a simple man who had survived battle after battle. Nothing special. But there was no time to think about that now. They needed to get away. Lyra pulled him toward a small exit at the back of the shelter, a narrow door that led out into the abandoned streets. Jake's hand gripped his weapon tightly, and his senses were on high alert. He didn't know what was waiting for them out there, but he knew it wouldn't be good. As they stepped into the cold night air, the first thing Jake noticed was the silence. It was strange, too quiet for a city that had once been alive with noise. The streets were empty, the buildings around them in ruins, their broken windows staring back like empty eyes. The occasional distant explosion echoed in the background, a reminder of the ongoing war.
"Where are we going?"
Jake asked, his voice low and tense as he looked around. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She was scanning the area, her eyes darting from one shadow to the next, as if expecting someone to jump out at any moment. She looked back at him, her face grim. "We need to keep moving," she said. "The drones are still out there. They'll be searching this area soon." Jake nodded, understanding that every moment they wasted could be their last. He didn't know where they were going, but he trusted Lyra. For now, She was the only one who seemed to know what they were doing. They moved quickly, weaving through the wreckage of the city, avoiding the main streets. The aliens had left their mark everywhere. Burning buildings, destroyed vehicles, and the remnants of human civilization scattered across the ground. But it was the lack of people that unsettled Jake the most. The streets should have been crawling with survivors, but there was no one. It was as though the city had been abandoned long before the invasion. "Why did you come to me?" Jake asked again, his voice urgent as they moved through the darkened streets. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "You said I'm the key to something. What did you mean?" Lyra stopped for a moment, her eyes still scanning the shadows. "I'll explain everything soon," she said. I need to get you to safety first." Jake felt a pang of frustration. Safety? There is no safety left. "The war's already lost." Lyra turned to face him, her expression fierce. "You're wrong. The war isn't lost." "Not yet. You just don't know how important you are." Her words hit Jake harder than he expected. He had always believed that there was no hope left for humanity. Every day he had fought for survival, not victory. But now, here was this woman, telling him that he was somehow the key to everything. He wasn't sure if he should believe her. It all felt too much like a dream. Something impossible. But the urgency in her voice made him wonder if she was telling the truth. They continued to move through the ruined city, their footsteps muffled by the rubble beneath them. After a while, they came to a large building, half-collapsed and overgrown with weeds. Lyra led Jake inside, her movements swift and purposeful. "This is it," she said, pausing at the entrance. "We can't go any farther until we get inside." Jake followed her through the crumbling doorway, his eyes adjusting to the dim light inside. The building looked like it had once been a research facility. Empty halls, broken machinery, and shattered glass scattered across the floor. Lyra moved quickly, heading toward a set of stairs that led down into the basement. She glanced back at Jake, her eyes serious. "This is where you'll find out what you really are," she said, before disappearing into the darkness below. Jake hesitated for a moment, but then he followed her. The air down in the basement was thick with dust, and the silence felt oppressive. He felt like they were walking into the heart of something that he wasn't ready to understand. When they reached the bottom of the stairs, Lyra motioned for him to follow her down another narrow hallway. She stopped in front of a metal door, its surface scratched and dented, as if it had been through years of wear and tear. Lyra stepped forward, pressing a panel on the wall next to the door. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a small room filled with computers and equipment. "This is where they kept the data," Lyra said, her voice low. "The information about you." Jake's confusion only deepened. "What kind of information?" Lyra walked over to one of the computers, typing in a series of commands. The screen flickered to life, showing a series of encrypted files. She pointed at the screen. "This is the key to understanding why you're important." Jake moved closer, looking at the data with a sense of growing unease. "This doesn't make sense. I'm just a soldier." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with determination.
"No, Jake, you're not just a soldier.
"You're the last hope for humanity." Before Jake could respond, a loud crash echoed from above. The sound of heavy footsteps and the unmistakable hum of alien drones filled the air. Lyra's eyes widened in panic. "They've found us," she said urgently. "We need to go. Now." Jake's heart skipped a beat. The aliens were here. They had found them. "Where do we go?" he asked, his voice tight with fear. Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the back of the room. "Follow me," she said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. They moved through a hidden passageway that led deeper into the building. The sound of the alien drones grew louder as they made their way through the narrow tunnels, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Lyra moved with purpose, leading Jake through the dark labyrinth. Finally, they reached a small, reinforced door at the end of the tunnel. Lyra pressed a series of buttons, and the door opened with a soft hiss. On the other side was an underground chamber, its walls lined with technology that Jake couldn't even begin to understand. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice filled with relief. "This is where you'll find out what you're capable of." Jake looked at her, his mind racing. "What do you mean? What am I supposed to do here?" Lyra stepped aside, motioning for him to enter the chamber. "You need to activate it," she said. "Your blood. It holds the key." Jake stood at the entrance, his body tense. He had no idea what Lyra was talking about. Blood? Key? None of this made sense. But then, as if guided by some instinct, Jake stepped into the chamber. He felt a strange hum in the air, a pulsing energy that seemed to respond to his presence. The walls of the chamber flickered to life, revealing strange symbols and glowing lines that danced across the surface. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes locking onto Jake's. "It's time," she said softly. Jake didn't know what was happening, but he felt a strange pull deep inside him, as if something was awakening within him. His body tingled, and the energy in the room grew stronger, almost overwhelming. Then, without warning, his hand reached out. It wasn't conscious. It just happened. His palm pressed against the wall, and a surge of energy shot through him, filling him with a power he couldn't explain. Lyra watched in awe as Jake's body glowed with a bright light. The energy seemed to flow through him, and for a moment, Jake felt like he was one with the very technology that surrounded him. What's happening to me?" Jake whispered, his voice filled with wonder and fear. Lyra stepped forward, her face a mixture of amazement and relief. "You're awakening. The power that was always inside you. The power to save humanity." As the energy pulsed around them, Jake realized that Lyra had been right all along. He wasn't just a soldier. He was something more, something humanity's survival depended on. But as the power surged within him, Jake knew that this was just the beginning. The aliens were still coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had destroyed everything. But now, for the first time in years, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The chamber was silent now, except for the low hum of the energy that surrounded Jake. He stood still, his hand still pressed against the wall, his body vibrating with an unfamiliar force. His head swam with confusion and fear, the sheer power of what he had just experienced overwhelming him. Lyra was watching him closely, her face filled with awe and relief. She had seen this before, but witnessing it in someone else, someone so important, was something else entirely. She knew this moment would come. She had always known. But even she could not have prepared for the enormity of the change that was taking place in Jake.
"You did it," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "The energy, it's flowing through you now."
Jake turned his head slightly, still struggling to grasp what had just happened. He could feel the power inside him, but it was so foreign, so intense, that he didn't know how to control it. His hand, still resting on the wall, glowed faintly. He pulled it back, watching as the light slowly faded from his palm. What am I?" Jake's voice was hoarse, as if he had spoken too much without realizing it. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes fixed on him with a mixture of admiration and urgency. "You're humanity's last chance," she said, her voice firm, filled with the certainty that had guided her actions for so long. "You're the key to defeating the aliens. The power inside you is the last weapon we have." Jake took a step back, his mind racing. "This doesn't make sense. I'm just a soldier. How could I have this power? Why me?" Lyra's eyes softened as she stepped forward, placing a hand gently on his arm. "It's because of your bloodline. You're not just any soldier, Jake. You come from a line of people who fought the first wave of alien invaders. Your ancestors had the same abilities, passed down through generations. And now, that power is within you.
You were chosen even before you were born. Jake could barely comprehend what she was saying.
His mind raced back to all the times he had fought in the trenches, the battles he had fought, with no understanding of why or how. He had always believed he was just another man, another soldier fighting to survive. But now, here he was, carrying the weight of humanity's survival on his shoulders. "How do you know all this?" he asked, his voice shaky with disbelief. Lyra gave him a sad smile. "I've been searching for you for years."
I knew that you were out there. I knew that you would awaken at the right time. You are the last descendant of the human leaders who first fought the aliens. You were meant to carry on their legacy. Jake felt a wave of anger rise within him. But I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of this. His voice grew louder, the frustration building inside him. Why couldn't things just go back to how they were?
Why does it have to be me?
Lyra stood still, her expression calm as she let him vent. She understood his frustration. She knew how impossible it all seemed. But she also knew that this was the only way forward.
It's not your choice, Jake, she said quietly. None of this is.
But you were born for this. It's in your blood. Your DNA.
You are the only one who can stop them. Jake clenched his fists, his mind a whirlwind of emotions.
Anger, fear, confusion. But beneath it all, a small spark of something else flickered. Was it hope? He wasn't sure. He wasn't ready to admit it yet. "How do I stop them?" he asked, his voice quieter now, filled with doubt.
Lyra nodded. "We need to find the central control hub of the alien forces."
They've been using technology to control everything on Earth. And you, Jake, can control their technology. You can turn their machines against them, just like your ancestors did. The thought of taking on the alien forces with nothing but his newfound power seemed impossible, but Lyra's words stirred something inside him. He didn't know how to control the power inside him, but maybe, just maybe, this was the chance he had been waiting for. The chance to make a difference, to fight back, to have a purpose again.
"We need to move," Lyra said, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "The alien drones are still tracking us."
They'll be here soon. Jake nodded, his mind now focused on the task at hand.
He had no choice but to follow Lyra. He couldn't do this alone, and the aliens were still out there, closing in on them with every passing moment. Lyra led the way through the underground chamber, back into the narrow passageways. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and decay, and Jake's footsteps echoed through the silence. He could feel the power within him, but it was still too raw, too unrefined. He didn't know how to control it yet, and that frightened him more than anything. As they moved through the maze of tunnels, Jake couldn't help but wonder what the future held for him. Was he really the key to humanity's survival? Could he truly wield the power inside him to defeat the alien invaders? Or was it all just some twisted fantasy, a story that Lyra had created in her mind to give him hope? They reached another set of doors, and Lyra quickly pressed a sequence of buttons to unlock them. The door slid open, revealing a large open space. It was a weapons depot, filled with stored military equipment, most of it still intact. Lyra led Jake to a nearby console and began typing rapidly, pulling up a map of the city. "We need to get to the alien control hub," she said, pointing to a location on the map. "It's in the heart of the city, heavily guarded. But I know a way in." Jake studied the map, trying to make sense of it all. The location was deep in the alien-controlled zone, surrounded by heavily fortified checkpoints and patrols. It was a suicide mission, plain and simple. But there was no choice. This was the only chance they had. "How do we get past all of them?" Jake asked, his voice strained. Lyra looked at him, a determined look in her eyes. "We don't fight them head-on. We use your power to take control of their technology. We'll move through the city undetected, using the aliens' own machines to cover our tracks."
"Once we reach the hub, You can disable their systems from the inside.
Jake nodded, trying to absorb the plan. It sounded risky, but it was their only option. They had to try. Lyra led him to a nearby storage crate, where she pulled out a small device. It was a comlink, designed for communicating with other resistance groups. She handed it to Jake. "This will allow us to stay in contact while we move through the city," she said.
We can't afford to be caught off guard.
Jake took the device, nodding.
Got it. They spent the next few minutes preparing, gathering weapons and equipment, making sure they were ready for the journey ahead.
As they moved toward the exit, Jake felt the weight of what he was about to do settle on his shoulders. This was no longer just about survival. This was about fighting for humanity's future. As they stepped back into the dark streets of the ruined city, the sound of alien drones grew louder. The hunt had begun. Lyra glanced at Jake, her expression determined.
Stay close, she said. And remember, you're not just a soldier anymore.
You're humanity's last hope. Jake took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the comlink. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. The moment when he would finally understand what he was capable of. The alien forces were coming. But so was humanity's salvation. The cold wind whipped through the deserted streets as Jake and Lyra moved swiftly through the shadows, staying close to the crumbling buildings. The city around them was a ghost town, its once bustling streets now silent except for the occasional hum of alien drones scanning the area. The feeling of being hunted, of being watched, pressed down on Jake's chest with every step they took. Lyra was ahead of him, moving with purpose, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Jake had no choice but to follow her lead. She had become the one person he trusted in this chaotic world, the one person who seemed to know what was happening. But even with her knowledge, they were both risking everything by going into the heart of the alien-controlled zone. The comlink in Jake's hand was quiet, but it gave him a sense of connection, a faint reminder that there were still others out there fighting. Lyra had told him to stay close, not just for safety, but because they were on a mission, humanity's last chance at survival. "We're getting close," Lyra whispered as they rounded a corner, moving toward a narrow alley that led deeper into the city.
Stay low, Jake nodded, his heart pounding. He had never felt this kind of pressure before.
As a soldier, he had been in dangerous situations, but none had felt as important as this. The future of humanity rested on their success. He had to do this, not just for himself, but for everyone who had fallen before him, for the people who still held on to hope, no matter how small it seemed. They stopped in the alleyway, crouching behind a pile of rubble. Lyra pulled out a small device and activated it. A low hum filled the air as she adjusted the controls. The screen displayed a map of the city, with several marked areas, including the central hub where the alien control systems were located.
"We need to move through the city's old tunnels," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the danger. "It's the safest route, but we'll have to be quick." Jake scanned the area, noting the quiet stillness around them.
It was eerie how empty the city felt. There should have been survivors, people hiding, scavenging for food, but there was nothing. Only destruction and silence. "How do you know about these tunnels?" Jake asked, keeping his voice low. "I've been tracking alien movements for years," she replied, adjusting the device.
"I know where they've placed their strongholds, and I know where the tunnels lead. The problem is that we'll have to cross through several alien checkpoints." Jake's stomach tightened. "And we can't be detected." Lyra nodded.
"Exactly. We use the alien technology to mask our presence, but it's not foolproof."
"If they're close enough, they'll detect us."
Jake took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "What happens if we're caught?" Lyra's gaze met his, her eyes serious. "Then it's over."
They'll take us, and they'll take the technology inside you. We can't let that happen.
A chill ran down Jake's spine as the gravity of the situation hit him. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something much larger. It was about preventing the aliens from gaining control of the one weapon that could save humanity, the power inside him. Lyra stood up, moving toward the entrance to the tunnel, her hand signaling Jake to follow. They entered the darkness, and the walls of the tunnel seemed to close in around them. The air was damp, thick with the smell of decay and dust. The only sound was the soft echo of their footsteps as they moved deeper into the underground passage. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the weight of the world pressing on their shoulders. Jake could feel the power inside him, still raw and unfamiliar. It pulsed in his chest, an unsteady rhythm, as if waiting for something, some trigger to activate it fully. Lyra led the way, her movements sure and confident. They passed through several sections of the tunnel, each one darker and more treacherous than the last. The walls were lined with old, rusted pipes and broken equipment. This place had been forgotten by time, but it was their only way through. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small, narrow passage that led up to a manhole cover. Lyra stopped and signaled for Jake to crouch down. She checked the device again, her eyes narrowing as she studied the readings. "The checkpoint is just ahead," she whispered. "Stay close."
We can't afford any mistakes. Jake nodded, his body tense as they moved through the final stretch of the tunnel.
They reached the manhole cover, and Lyra carefully lifted it, peering out to check for any signs of alien patrols. The street above was quiet, the dim glow of a few scattered streetlights casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The alien drones were still patrolling, their low hum faint in the distance. Lyra carefully pulled herself out of the tunnel, followed closely by Jake. They crouched behind a nearby car, their hearts pounding as they waited for the right moment to move. "We need to cross to the other side," Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper.
There's another tunnel entrance near the control hub. Once we're there, we can disable their systems from the inside. Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the street.
The air felt heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. This was the moment. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. As they moved from cover to cover, the tension in Jake's chest only grew. Every footstep felt too loud, every shadow too dark. They were so close now, but the threat of detection loomed over them like a storm waiting to break. They reached the next alleyway without incident, but as they stepped into the shadows, a faint sound caught Jake's attention. It was soft at first, but then it grew louder. The unmistakable sound of alien drones hovering above. Jake froze, his heart racing as he looked around for a place to hide. Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a doorway just ahead. They slipped inside, just as the drones passed overhead. Jake held his breath, his body pressed against the cold stone of the building. The sound of the drones grew fainter as they moved on, and Jake let out a slow breath, trying to steady his nerves. "Close call," Lyra muttered, her voice tense. "We can't afford too many more of those." Jake nodded, his mind still racing. "How much farther?" "Not much," Lyra replied, checking the device again. "We're almost there." They continued their journey, weaving through alleyways and abandoned buildings, using the shadows as their cover. The control hub was close now, just a few blocks away. The alien presence was stronger here, but Lyra seemed confident they could get through undetected. When they reached the final stretch, Lyra stopped and looked at Jake. Her expression was serious, her eyes focused.
"This is it," she said.
We're going to have to use your power to get through the final defenses. The hub is heavily guarded, but if we disable the security systems, we can get in.
Jake nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the power inside him, still raw and untamed. But he knew that this was the moment. This was his chance to do what he was meant to do. Lyra moved forward, leading him toward a large building at the center of the alien-controlled area. The entrance was guarded by alien drones, their sleek, metallic forms standing watch. The air felt thick with anticipation, and Jake could feel the power inside him thrumming, eager to be unleashed.
Ready?
Lyra asked, her voice calm despite the danger. Jake took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the comlink. "Ready," he said, his voice steady though inside, his nerves were on edge. Together they stepped into the open, and Jake reached out with his mind focusing on the alien technology in front of him. He could feel the drone's presence, their systems connected to the central hub. With a deep breath, he let the power inside him flow, reaching out to control the machines. The drones turned, their sensors locking onto Jake and Lyra. But this time, instead of attacking, they froze, their systems overridden by Jake's control. The power surged through him, a wave of energy that coursed through his veins, stronger than anything he had ever felt before. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes wide with amazement.
Gah! You're doing it!
She exclaimed. Jake focused, pushing the energy outward. The drones powered down, their weapons falling silent. The way was clear.
"We're in," Lyra said, a smile crossing her face. "Now, let's end this." Jake followed her into the building, the central control hub just ahead.
The power inside him still hummed, a steady pulse that matched the rhythm of his heart. They had made it this far, but the hardest part was still to come.